but it's happening either way, which is cool to see. People don't need to get it. And, the UX and UI has improved enough where it doesn't matter if people get it. Like this stuff will be running in the background and
Hmm.
it will still achieve the same goals, I think, of like democratizing access and, flattening the world a little bit.
Here we have Phil. And Phil, how about you? Oh, just before we start, this is not investment advice. Nothing we say is investment advice. Please do your own research, and some of the people in this show may or may not hold some of the assets that are discussed. Okay, now that that's out of the way. Phil, would you like to give a quick intro or your crypto origin story?
Yeah, yeah. No, so I got into crypto around like 2000, like everyone else, just with Bitcoin and then going down the whole rabbit hole. I think that whole cycle introduced a lot of interesting things that continued to develop over the years and created a lot of FOMO and, just an explosion of interest across the board from all kinds of places. So I was watching it, dabbling in it, and, it was just fascinating. And I just wanted to learn, more and more about it. So I just dove, further and further, just reading everything, doing research, talking to people until, I became kind of like obsessed with different things. But yeah, my background, I was in real estate investing for a long time. And then, yeah, since 2016, 17, been investing in crypto, worked at a startup, for a year and a half, 2 years with some of my best friends. And then, yeah, now I'm investing in crypto and real estate full time.
Nice. So is that when it's like 2017 was the cycle you really got involved, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's kind of when I jumped in also. I miss those days sometimes. That was a pretty crazy cycle.
You had like a handful of things to track and you could count them
Hmm.
on one hand. It was like there was like Bitcoin, there was Ripple, there was Ethereum, not too many things beyond that. There were some, crazy projects, most of which don't exist anymore now, but you had all the other nascent things like Zcash and, Monero and all those. But it was interesting. I mean, it really was. I feel like that time was like a Cambrian explosion of different
Hmm.
ideas and different things that started to be built, kind of on top of everything else. So I think it was like the perfect time to really get your feet wet and get into it, get rugged a few times and gain some good experience.
Yeah, I keep saying that we need to have like an episode where we just talk about like how the worst rugs that we faced, because
Yeah,
everyone's got those stories. I had stuff on Cryptopia. I don't know if you were you ever on
I
Cryptopia.
remember Cryptopia. Yeah,
Yeah, there was that place was like what Mexi is now is kind of what
yeah.
Cryptopia was. It was just like where you find all the shit coins. They were all on Cryptopia.
It was the only place you could find certain shit coins, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I left a lot on there too, and then it went down. So I basically just, I got totally rocked. But it wasn't, yeah,
Yeah,
but it was, it was like I feel like everyone's got those stories, and you just kind of have to you
yeah.
have to learn the lessons and
If you haven't
take it.
sent money to and from, these sketchy, dodgy exchanges where you don't know if your money's gonna be there or not, then have you really been living in crypto?
Yeah, it's true. So
Praying it goes through and hits your own private
yeah,
wallet.
yeah, yeah. I definitely still do the send like $5 worth and wait to see if it gets there, and then I send the rest. It's still pretty scary. Yeah, like there's just like nothing. You have to just wait until they send you an email or something to see if it gets there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm sure everybody's had funds stuck on some bankrupt exchange or those exchanges that go out of business, they get shut down. Like if you've been in crypto long enough and you don't have one of those stories, then, I don't believe that you've been working in crypto.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So you're today you said you're also running you have a crypto fund, you invest in crypto these days. Is that through like a company that you have or
Yeah, I have a vehicle with a few friends, and basically it overlaps a little with the same people I invest with in real estate, mainly, kind of friends, family, people I've met online, never met in person, but a random mix. So it's an interesting milieu of folks that I do different deals with and investments with.
nice? How do you get in on these conversations? Like if you find a project you want to get in on and it's not public yet, like
Hmm.
how do you get on the table there? How do you get to the table there?
That's That's like what I love about this space is so many times I would just find something that I think is interesting on either on Twitter or doing research, and I reach out directly to the team or to the people, either via Twitter or on Telegram or Discord, and join the group chats, try and pick the team's brain, ask questions, things like that, and everybody is for the most part very open and willing to answer questions, talk about their projects and the things that they're trying to solve and what their needs are. And fortunately, if they're looking to raise money or something like that, and I can help them with it or invest in it, then we have a good match, and you already have, sort of a background just from kind of discussing the project for a long time with them. So it makes it a lot easier. But like the more deals that you do, I think the more deal flow that you get, and just the other people that you co-invest with, the other funds you co-invest with, people are always sharing ideas, sharing different theses, different narratives. Yeah, so I think it just kind of builds the more investments that you make and the more interesting teams and the more help that you give, it kind of comes around, um,
Hmm.
you know, and it all works, in your favor when, especially if you're trying to contribute, some value to different teams and things like that.
Mm, sure. So you spend a lot of time on Twitter then?
I would say most of it's on like Discord and Telegram. On
Okay.
Twitter is I do a lot of like research and finding, you know, different projects, and also I like to read what other people are thinking and what their ideas are and compare them to, kind of the way that I'm looking at different topics.
Gotcha. Yeah, I tend to like Discord. Telegram is it's good for small chats, but then when they get too big, it gets kind of unruly, right? And
Well, you just lose kind of if you're not following it like in real time, right? You're
right.
just gonna miss everything and have like 1,000 messages. I do like Discord better because you can organize the Discord servers much better.
Yeah.
Telegram is more like stream of consciousness, conversational style, like, you know, where it's hard to kind of get a summary of the discussions and things like that. But they serve their purposes for different things. Telegram's probably, good for DMing with people and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It's one of the things I love about crypto is people are just very open. Like you could DM
Yeah.
founders of projects and they'll answer back.
Hmm.
It's not like you have to do this whole like email thing where like they hide behind an email and get to you 2 days later or something. Like it's just like very open. It's
Yeah,
very flat. Yeah.
it is. There's no hierarchy. There's no people that are, for the most part, sometimes there are, but there's really no people that are like, hey, let me see your credentials. Let me see that you've gone to, some Ivy League school or something like that before I talk to you about, what I'm doing. It's mostly people who are, they respond if you have intelligent questions to ask them. And, you're not just sitting there throwing shit at the wall and being like, oh, when price go up, and
Yeah,
when token, when this. Like as long as you're really coming up with thoughtful things and important pain points or different areas and solutions, then everybody that I've found is willing to kind of have a conversation and talk to you about, exactly what they're trying to do.
sure. So I guess what's the project that you're most excited about right now? What's kind of like if I know you have, many projects you're into, but if you could, you know,
Yeah,
talk about
there's
most
a
exciting.
there's a few. I think to me, I think the apps, the games, and the projects that capture the mind share from non-crypto users and just the regular people. Those are the most exciting things for me because it just means that crypto is no longer like this niche, like over here. It's become just a part of society. And the Bitcoin ETF and stuff like that is sort of you're on the right path, but to me, I'm not going to feel like we're really mainstream until there's like a million users on an app, that's built on crypto rails. And, in that respects, it's like gaming, sports, the metaverse, something in that arena. And, some of my favorite projects are, you know, like Karate Combat. Love exactly what they're doing. And, I spent a lot of time working with those guys. There's Parallel and what they're building with, the whole Prime ecosystem, and just the card game is one of the best games that is existing right now. If you just try playing it, it's very easy for me to see like this gaining an incredibly large following just of regular people that have no knowledge of crypto. And then, in the metaverse, there's a whole FutureVerse, which I've spent, you know, so many hours just digging in, researching every facet of it, and kind of what they're building is one of the most ambitious things I've ever seen. And it at first glance seems insane, but then it's like all the parts that they're working on and the way they fit together make complete sense. And I mean, now they're officially partnered with like Ready Player One and these like different movie studios and stuff like that. So it's like they are going to make Ready Player One happen, and that's like insane to me.
Wow.
It's going to be amazing.
So could you go into a little more of what exactly it is they're doing? Is it a metaverse project?
Yeah, yeah. So they're basically building the infrastructure for their vision of an open metaverse, which is, not one that's a world that's like created and run by like Disney or Apple or anyone for that matter. Where a lot of these big companies are trying to do their own version of a metaverse, but it's exactly like, their vision of it is exactly like the Apple App Store. It's like they want to have this big world that they still control and they can kick you out of if they don't like you.
Yeah.
So their whole vision is really just building the tooling and infrastructure to have an open metaverse that anyone and everyone can participate in. And they have, a few different tokens to accomplish the goal, but it's also they rolled up into FutureVerse like 11 or 12 separate companies over the past year, and they raised a ton of money at, I think, north of like $1 billion valuation last year. So they're well on their way and they have the right partners. They're partnered with movie studios, they're partnered with some of the big names in music, they're partnered with some of the best VCs. So it's been really cool to kind of watch them work through this and unveil it, a little piece at a time. But if you've been following them, you can tell where it's all leading and how it's all kind of coming together and being shown piece by piece right now.
Very nice. Yeah, I remember I found like an AI project called Asto a few
Hmm.
months ago, or like maybe 6 months ago, and it had just pumped insanely. So I avoided it because it's kind of there was an air gap under it, the price. But
Yeah.
like I went into the Discord just to learn more about it, and then I saw there was also like the root network, right, which is in there too. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, what is going on? And I kind of just like avoided it because it just seemed kind of weird to me how there was many projects in one Discord, and but Asto was also involved with FutureVerse, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So ASTO is the token basically for project, which is now part of FutureVerse, but it was called Altered State Machine. And I don't know if you know the book and the show Altered Carbon, but that's kind of where they got the name
Okay.
from. It was the one where, you can kind of upload your consciousness into a memory card, and basically your body is in effect a skin, and they called them skins. So you could like shed your body and just put your consciousness in another body and kind of live forever, pretty much. So
Oh,
that's
I
kind
see.
of where they got the name from. It's a great show, and it was a show on Netflix for like a few seasons too.
I
So
think I
you
watched
check
the
it out.
pilot season. I watched the pilot season of it, and then
Yeah,
didn't watch more. Which I liked the pilot episode. I don't watch TV shows, but I did like the pilot. It
yeah,
was really
it's a cool
good.
idea. But they were into AI like going back, you know, 4 years ago. So even before like AI was blowing up over the last like year or two, they were working on it. And basically they wanted, they released this NFT collection where you could own your own AI agent or AI brain, which was really cool the way that they went about that and the way that they were envisioning like being able to have your own kind of unique NFT AI that can learn and do certain things, be able to take that and utilize it for, different applications. And they've started to build out some of these applications like, yeah, on a level they had like a World Cup type soccer game where your team is basically just running around based on the way you train them, and you're kind of the brains can be learning from the different inputs and stuff that you give them, but it's like all of these seemingly simple games and things like that are leading to just more complex use cases, and they've had this overarching like map of where they're going with all this, but everyone that like from the outside was sort of just seeing pieces of it here and there, and it was really hard to actually put the whole thing together and realize like, what they were trying to achieve and like what their goals were until, they came out and laid it out for everyone, with the whole roll up of 12 companies and the FutureVerse white paper. And then, just I think it was just a month ago they announced the partnership with Ready Player One, and what they're building with the writer and producers of that movie. And I think they are building, it's like, life imitates art, that sort of thing.
Damn. Yeah, that sounds pretty neat. I definitely am a believer that the metaverse is coming for sure. It's only a matter of time. We got the Apple
Well,
Vision Pro out now. You know,
one of the quotes I saw from, I think it was like that guy Dan Farah, who is the producer of Ready Player One. He was like, I didn't think that we could even ever like make the world that, Ready Player One had been, showing people on screen for. another decade or two. And after he met, the FutureVerse founders and everything, he was like, I didn't realize like we were so much closer and that like we could be able to do it like now.
Wow. So when they build this world, right, how are people getting into it? Are they using like a VR headset, or is it just like a desktop application, or
No, so right now there isn't really anything that's been released except for kind of these ancillary projects that are kind of around, sitting on the edges of the Futureverse. Like they have a boxing game called The Next Legends where it'll be, you know, you get to pick your fighter who's an NFT. You can outfit them, have different utilities and different clothing. And I think you can also teach them how to fight and also utilize the AI brain in those. They have a racing game with cars that you can customize and things like that. So I think it's like very much from the ground up. They're trying to build a groundswell of community among different categories of shared interests, like video games, car enthusiasts, fighting game, people that love, boxing, stuff like that. They have the soccer game, people that like, doing these little football games with these kind of animated characters. But the common thread amongst them is that they're all utilizing the infrastructure and the tools that they're building. So these are like the use cases for it. And it's very much so just refine. I think it's like using these games and refining the tools and making it better, and then scaling it as wide and as deep as they can go. So like root is, the L1, and they're gonna make it that you can basically utilize it with a variety of different tokens, and you can use any of those tokens to pay gas on the network with, like, Ripple. You can pay in Root, you can pay in Asto, you can pay in Silo. Those are kind of all the different network tokens in the Futureverse.
oh wow, that's cool. So it's kind of like almost a gaming ecosystem, right? It's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think they're using games to effectively demonstrate the actual infrastructure that is built and already built,
Hmm.
and using it kind of as test cases, I think, to make it a better experience and smooth everything out and fix all the bugs and stuff like that. And then I think you're going to see the more kind of hardcore applications that and more complex things that are built on top of that.
Gotcha.
So like these simple games and stuff like that, I think they're mainly tools just to run through the bugs, do trial runs, just get it's like the practice, the run through before they're going to launch something, as comprehensive as a whole world, like the Oasis or something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's really neat. Yeah, definitely gonna follow these guys because I think that they're doing some interesting stuff, and Altered State Machine
Hmm.
too is a really cool project. So I'm interested to see how they integrate the Altered State Machine
And
project
and
here.
they're doing it in such a practical and just well thought out way. When you understand what they're trying to build, and then you're looking at each step. There's a lot of people that have been following it for a while and are like, "Oh, it's taking so long. Why is like the development's going so slow and blah blah," without realizing like these guys are trying to build the most ambitious thing probably like ever done in, definitely in the world of like crypto, but like in the world of just like digital. This
Yeah,
this is like a gargantuan task. And the you can see it in the way that they've been releasing things. that they're more interested in the way that the tools are working rather than like, oh, this game is successful or this game is like gonna pick up 1 million users. No, it's like, oh, we wanted to make sure this little like thing that we patented to choose your character like randomly by the way that you move your mouse works.
Yeah,
it's it's crazy, and like they've been doing this stuff and they have patents for different parts of their infrastructure that they are, you know, clearly lining up for a much bigger kind of use case.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always the thing with tech is like everyone wants the developers to go faster and to ship faster. And,
Hmm.
this metaverse thing, I think, is one of the most difficult things in crypto that people are building because you're not just building gaming infrastructure. You're building an infrastructure for people to own things that they create in the games or they might earn in the
Yeah,
games. And that you need to create an entire L1 also based on that. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's so much effort. And, it's not going to happen immediately. It's going to take a long time. Uh,
yeah.
like,
But I
you
think
know,
like if you ever played video games and things like that, or if you've ever been a gamer, a lot of these things that they're on their way to doing are things that people have, commonly dreamt about it, like being able to take assets that you have in one game and use them in another. Like if you play Fortnite and you have a skin that you earned or that you bought that you love and you want to wear it for your character in another game. Like, hey, why can't we, either make that an NFT or something and move it over and do that beyond the bounds of like one single game manufacturer or one, game platform. Like, it wasn't until the last few years where you could even play games like if you were on a PS6 versus or a PS5 versus a Xbox, and now you can finally like mix it up with desktop and like Xbox and PS5s. But for the longest time it was like, oh, you're playing on the PC. Okay, you can only play against other people playing on the PC. So it's happening, and I think, what they're doing is just accelerating everything into their vision of the world, which is where everything can be open and you can own digital assets across different worlds and across different games and across different platforms and bring them with you and things like that.
yeah, for sure. I think it also fits very well with like the societal shift of everything just becoming digitized. I mean, that's been
Yeah,
going on for decades now. I mean, people spend more time in their machines, and I don't think that's going to stop happening. It's only going to continue, right? And so I think that this is a really interesting idea. Like, people are going to spend a significant portion of their lives, and it can expand even beyond games and, just beyond
yeah,
like hanging out in a digital world with friends that you know all over the world, and you can't meet up in real life, so you just meet up in a game,
exactly.
and it creates a more
It's
immersive universe.
social, like crossing, all kinds of like boundaries into social, like in socializing and also in real life. Like I think some of the biggest applications will be like decentralized identity and being able to abstract, your identity from, things like your email address, your date of birth, your ID photo. It's you think about all the data that we've given up to Amazon and Instagram and Facebook, right? How amazing would it be if you could go and buy something online without, them knowing your complete purchase history, your date of birth, your demographic, like everything. And it's like, hey, maybe one day you can have your avatar or your character go and buy stuff for you. And beyond that, and you cryptographically signing for something that basically says yes, this person's like legit and is real and it's not like a terrorist or a criminal or something like that. Like it's it's freedom, and it's more like, freedom from kind of a surveillance state and things like that, and being able to, freely transact and, spend and buy things and do whatever you want without fear of, kind of the big conglomerates like knowing every single little thing about you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I mean, I think the digital identity thing, we got to get away from passwords, man. I mean, the password is
Yeah.
so, I still feel like security, that's kind of like living in the fax machine days. This is so, I mean, this is like a tech bubble, late 90s thing, and we're still doing it now. We still
Yeah.
haven't like evolved to the next phase of security.
It's like
Um,
generate a 20 character password utilizing numbers and symbols and everything. And then by the time you think about it, you're like, shit, I'm not going to be able to remember this. I guess I'll
yeah,
have to use one of these password apps. Okay,
right.
well, what are you going to use to open the password app? Another fucking password.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's one that controls
it's so
all your
stupid.
passwords. So God forbid someone finds out about your master password. Now they have control of
That's
everything.
it. It's
Yeah.
so stupid.
So it doesn't work. It's like a fundamentally not gonna work. Like
Yeah.
you it's just silly. You can't write them
It's like
down.
you
They have to be
layer it.
complicated. Yeah,
Yeah, you layer it on top, and there's still like one central point of failure.
yeah, there's still one master key that if someone gets, it's like over. So me personally, I do the password management. I have one really long, complicated password that I remember that isn't written down anywhere. But
Hmm.
like, there's risks to that too. Like, what happens if something happens to me, or I forget it, or
What if you hit your head? Like, what if you fell off
yeah,
a bike?
yeah, and you have
That
memory
shit's
issues and
gone.
you can't remember it. Like, it's gone now, right? And
It's just gone.
no one can. Yeah, so it's kind of it doesn't make sense really. It's kind of stupid.
Like,
Um,
what if that happened and you wanted to like leave all of your assets, your digital assets and everything to like your family or to someone else? And it's
yep,
like, oh, you forgot your 64 character
your
fucking
seed
password.
phrase.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think about that all the time. Like, okay, I have my seed phrase, I have my keys and all my cryptos on there and stuff. But like, if I, you know, knock on wood, had a heart attack or something, what happens to it, right?
yeah.
It's all gone, right? They can't open it. That's the design of it. And then people freaked out when Ledger did that recover thing, right? And they said,
Oh my
oh,
God.
how could they
I
do
freaked
this?
out.
Like, yeah, it's pretty scary, but I could see what they're trying to do. They're trying to fix this problem, and it is
It's
a
a
problem.
problem. It's a problem in that 99% of people would rather sacrifice like this decentralized ethos of be your own bank and blah 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 to something where they don't bear ultimate responsibility. That's
Yeah,
like 99% of people have a problem with being ultimately responsible for, their own stuff because like you said, like if something happens or you forget, like people screw up all the time,
yeah,
they want to have a backup. They want to have someone that's like, okay, it's fine, don't worry about it. Instead of, the guy that threw out $1 billion of Bitcoin or something and now it's like
I
gone
know.
forever.
Yeah, man, I think about those people all the time. Like when the Bitcoin price goes up, I'm like, that's just a lifetime of pain that they signed up for because it's just
Yeah.
going to keep going up, and it's going to be like in 10 years, 20 years, it's going to be like $100 billion, $200 billion. Like they're just going to keep publishing these reports and shaming these people, and it's just hilarious. It's so funny.
This Bitcoin pizza would have made you the richest person in the world.
Yeah, 40 years ago, yeah, it's like, a $50 billion pizza or whatever. Like it's coming. It's gonna happen.
But
It
it's
just
like,
makes great
you know,
headlines.
that's like not that bad. Like if you spent it, at the time and it was worth this. I mean, I feel bad for the guy that forgot his password and like this shit is just gone.
Yeah. I do too. I
So,
mean, there's stories of some of them like they threw them away and they're trying to like petition the city to let them go to the landfills and find it. And
yeah.
I'm like,
There
man,
was a
this
guy
is
in England, I
horrible.
think he had like a hedge fund or someone that was willing to fund like combing through the entire landfill or something like that to find his hard drive that,
Oh man,
he said had like, hundreds of millions on it.
jeez.
There's definitely better systems, and I think, account abstraction is probably the biggest step, like one of the biggest steps forward, in this respect.
Sure.
But again, like I think ultimately people don't want to have too much responsibility, like,
Yeah.
or the final responsibility.
Yep. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, I have friends who, they're like, oh, now that the ETF is out, like, should I just buy the ETF? And I'm like, hey, man, you know what? If you haven't been bothered enough to do the research to like buy your own Bitcoin, buy your own wallet, you're probably not going to, and you're going to miss out on this run up. So just buy the ETF. Like,
Yeah, just buy
just
the ETF in your 401, and you don't have to think about it. Like
right.
onboarding friends and family to crypto, like in 2018 and 19 was the biggest pain point and like pain in the ass ever. You know, I
Yep.
gave out ledgers in 2018 and 2017 to people, and like they were like, "What the hell am I gonna do with this?"
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
easier just to be like, "Okay, just go to Coinbase, open up an account. I'll send you some stuff, and like, that's it. You don't have to remember any of this stuff." But like,
Yeah. You're not
it
getting the
is
full
funny.
power of it.
Yeah, exactly. So like people lost the whole cypherpunk like ideals and what crypto originally was meant for, but it's happening either way, which is cool to see. People don't need to get it, and the UX and UI has improved enough where it doesn't matter if people get it. Like this stuff will be running in the background, and
Hmm.
it will still achieve the same goals, I think, of like democratizing access and flattening the world a little bit, which I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us got into crypto because we were idealistic and shared, a lot of these values that we saw in crypto.
No, 100%. Let's see what I want to talk briefly about karate because I guess another
Hmm.
thing that you've been talking a lot about. So
Yeah.
I haven't done too much research into it honestly, and that's I probably should have. But could you briefly go over like what karate is and how come you're so excited about it?
Yeah. So it's a karate, it's an MMA league, focused on striking. It's like almost 6 years old right now. And the entry into Web3, like it literally wasn't possible to do this when the league was started. It was, two of my best friends started it in 2018, and I helped them to build it in the first like 2 years. And like we couldn't do this, and I thought about a token and stuff like this. Even asked Pat in 2018 about making a karate token, but like you just couldn't do it. Like the concepts weren't there, the infrastructure wasn't there to do it. But now, we can, and so it launched last year, and it really is just the ability to align incentives with a token is such an incredibly powerful tool that no other professional sports league is able to do. Like you would never have an NFL, an NBA, or any of these sports leagues that are even able to try to do this because it has to be like owned by people like us or like crypto natives and stuff like that who are willing to basically give up ownership of the whole league. And that's pretty much what we all did with like so the karate equity was basically sold to an offshore foundation, Cayman Foundation, and that's the foundation that issued the karate token. And now the karate token governs the entire league. And so the holders of the karate token, there's a governance process. They can change rule sets. They already have changed different rules. They can vote on things, And it made up only gaming, which I think is one of the coolest things, where you can bet on different fighters in every fight and earn more karate. And it's called up only gaming because you can't lose your tokens. So even if you get it wrong, you just don't win any tokens. You retain your original amount that
Oh,
you
interesting.
bet. So this is powerful because one, the the primary reason why people stop betting on sports or something like that is because they just lose all their money, and
Sure.
there's the risk of ruin, which sucks, and we don't want that to happen to anyone. The second thing is, betting on sports is creates the highest form of engagement between like fans and the sports that they watch. Just like if they're able to put money on their favorite team or a player, or it doesn't even have to be their favorite team. It could be some random team. All of a sudden, that's the most interesting thing that they're watching. So this this is something that like all the younger demographics, they are just incredibly infatuated with like being able to wager on outcomes of different sports and events and things like that. So up only gaming hits all those kind of spots for them, but it also, at the same time, is a way to reward active and engaged users. And you're basically, through the inflation of the winnings, you're kind of punishing the passive people. So there's no free rides. It's like, a lot of problems in DAOs and with other projects is that you get these large token holders who they buy, a whole bunch of tokens, and then they don't want to participate because they're lazy. So they're not the ones in the forums. They're not the ones discussing. They're not the ones debating. They're just like, oh, did number go up? I look at it, like once a month. They're not the active participants, right? But they're going to reap the benefits because they hold the token, right? So it's like they get the free ride from all the other people doing the work. The karate token with Up Only Gaming just completely flips that on its head. Because if you're not participating and you're not watching the events and you're not betting on fighters, then guess what? Your holdings are slowly being inflated, you know, away.
Sure. That makes a lot of
So
sense.
it's a incredibly powerful tool. It aligns incentives. The fighters participate, like, they get a portion of the winnings from the prize pool. All of the fans that, they're basically voting and voting with, it's like put your money where your mouth is. They're like, they have certain favorite fighters. Well, let's see, like, put your karate on him. And it allows for a lot of things that are going to be in the future be able to like be built on top of it, like the whole ecosystem of things that you will be able to do with karate. So it's cool. It's like the first of its kind. I think this is the future of just Web3 and sports, and kind of unlocking the potential and the flexibility that being able to have a token does, without it just being kind of this bolt-on shit that a lot of these like traditional Web 2 outfits and companies are trying to do. A lot of people have these fan tokens and things like that, which really amount to just jack shit. And it's like, this is sort of just another way to fleece our fan base and, extract money from them. And I think fans are smart. They know that they've been getting exploited, and you can only squeeze the juice out of, real sports fans for so long. It's like you look at professional sports, the whole landscape, it's like tickets for games are like double, tripling in prices. The valuations from TV rights and media rights mean that all these teams are worth like billions of dollars. And what are the fans getting? They're getting more expensive seats. They can't go to these games anymore. They're too expensive. They're priced out. Like all the food there costs, you an arm and a leg just to go to a basketball or football, like a professional basketball, professional football game is going to cost you like $500. It's crazy. It's like you have to pay for the pleasure of being a fan of professional sports, which, you know, we want to totally change that. And, that's what we're doing with karate and the karate token.
Very cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's like an actual league. I didn't realize that it was a league. And the way you
Yeah.
described it is like NFL, like if any NFL was a token, like that makes a lot of sense. But you're right that it would basically like the people who own the NFL would not benefit, right? Because then it goes to the people instead of them.
Well, think about the incentives, right? The incentives of the owners in the NFL and any other sports league is basically just to generate revenue and keep as much of it as possible. So they're directly at odds with the players who are basically their employees. In the NFL, the players, it kind of sucks. They don't have guaranteed contracts, right? So it's
Hmm.
like that's why you have guys willing to sit out a whole season if they can't get, guaranteed money because they know if they bust their knee open and can never come back, they're screwed. And so if they don't
For sure.
secure, their lifetime like value with one contract, then they could be like completely up shit's creek. And so the incentives are not aligned and they're actually at odds with each other. And same thing with their own fans, right? It's like that, and the teams are just trying to extract value, again, from the players and the fans. So you're changing this whole dynamic in Web3, which you're never able to do in traditional sports, and align the incentives. Like as the karate token grows in value, as the network value increases, everybody benefits because the fighters, they're getting tokens, they're getting a portion of the prize pools just automatically, like 10% going to them. All the fans who hold the token and use it to vote on different things uh, are, benefiting when the value of it's going up. So it's you're able to create a win-win situation where every other form of sports is kind of this antagonistic relationship between, the customer fan base, the players, the participants, and the owners. And again, like UFC, right? UFC's biggest thing is the fighters, they get paid like shit in comparison to the value of the league and what the owners of the league make, you know, and they have no avenue other than to just leave and go fight for another league, right? But there is no other UFC. It's like the second best is like, peanut sized compared to the UFC. It's like, you're foregoing, a lot of fame and fortune if you go somewhere else, but at the same time, you're not getting paid exactly what you're worth, in the UFC unless, you're negotiating like a one-time payout or something like that. I mean,
Sure.
that's why they lost their heavyweight champion, like left for the PFL because the PFL, what'd they do? They gave him an allowance and said, "Hey, you could fight other fights if you want to do a boxing fight, like a mega boxing fight, crossover boxing fight. We'll let you do that." And you can, do like a Conor McGregor type event and make, 50 million bucks off of it. The UFC was like, "No, you're not allowed to do that if you're under contract with us. Like you're
Oh,
not going to be
geez.
able to just like go fight in some like crossover thing and take 50% of the pay-per-view or whatever."
Yeah, that's
So
a
it's,
little whack.
yeah, I mean that's how it is. And think about it, in the UFC also, like they instituted uniforms where a lot of these guys were getting paid by sponsors to wear, different sponsored outfits and stuff like that. And then the UFC banned it. And they made it was like Reebok sponsored it. So then everybody just wears like Reebok. So it's like all the value is just going to the people that own the UFC at the top. And none of the value that was going to the people who were creating it, which were, mainly the fighters. Like none of the early days fighters in UFC, like, once their careers were done, it's not like they really got anything out of it other than, whatever they were paid for their fights.
Sure. I do have to ask though, if no one loses money by betting, right? What's stopping me from just betting on both sides and ensuring I always, make money on every
Oh, you
fight?
can't. in the app you can only bet on
Oh,
one
okay. All right.
fighter. Like, yeah. But there are odds, like, and you're able to see like what percentage of the money is on each fighter. It'll be like, oh, this fighter has like 65% of, the prize pools on him, and this one has 35. And if you're betting on the underdog, you get paid out, obviously a
That's
greater
cool.
portion of it.
So like can
So
you watch the fight through the app as well? Like when they happen?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So I mean, you got to download the app. I'll send you
Yeah,
some
for sure.
karate. It's very smooth. Um, we're adding new features to it every day. Like you can actually do the governance like through the app. I wonder if I could show you. But it's super smooth. Like here was a proposal which we call them kick, like karate
Nice.
improvement things. And this one was about rolling over rewards. So there was like two no contests in the last fight, and so those prize pools didn't get paid out because there were no
Oh, I
contests.
see.
And people were like, "This is stupid. We should just like roll that whole prize pool over to the next one." So someone made the proposal, and then 2 days later, it was up for vote, and it passed by like 96% of people.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
I mean, all the stats are crazy. Like the stickiness of the users using the app and participating in up only gaming is like the growth is crazy. I think for the last two events, it's been over like 100% growth, like between
Wow.
each event. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
now
know
there's like,
MMA is a big deal in the US at least.
yeah,
Like a lot of my friends watch UFC more than most other sports, honestly, besides football maybe, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely a
But
big
it's
deal.
like now you can participate in it and you can also benefit from it. Like imagine that, being a fan of something and like being able to kind of make money along with the growth of the league. Like that's pretty fucking awesome. Like that's amazing if like everyone could share in it. Like and that's
Yeah,
that's what we want. That's what everybody wants. Like so, that's the goal, and I think we're well on the way to having that happen, and it's like everything else. It's a in in progress experiment, but I think things are looking great so far.
nice, excellent. All right, so coming up on time here, and I just
Yeah.
before we go, is there anything that you want people to know, like follow you or a website or anything like that, where people can know more about you or your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just on Twitter at Huangwei, which is
Okay.
my last name. And yeah, I mean, I kind of post on there, every week or so, but mainly I'm on just like Discord and Telegram, or you can email me or something like that. But I'm always looking at new projects. I love seeing just the way things fit together, and especially kind of cornerstones of different DeFi Legos. Like that's the other thing, we didn't touch on, but like that I'm pretty like fanatical about and obsessed with are just these Lego pieces that whole ecosystems can be built on top of. And, a lot of the evolution from food farms during, DeFi summer into now, and seeing like full-fledged real financial applications that are being, assembled is just incredible. And I think again, crypto is a way to reduce friction between people and like being able to democratize access to capital markets and liquidity. And, I think that's the most powerful thing. And, you know, having people around the world 24/7 being able to participate in, pretty liquid markets is incredible, and is just the beginning of the potential of what we're going to see. And I think, every day in the space is just exciting, and the the breadth of it, like, and the variety of it has become so large. Nowadays it just seems like I'm drinking from a fire hose all the time. Like there's like, you've got projects to look at, everybody in RCC has like different projects they're looking at, and just going through our chat sometimes, it's like, wow, holy crap, like they're in another world on Avalanche or Trader Joe and Kachira and these guys in Solana and that whole ecosystem. So it's like cool to be able to see, but at the same time, it's like a little stressful in that there's no way anybody can kind of cover everything and like understand everything. But I think that's just the excitement and the amount of builders in the space, that leads to this. And it is like this ever expanding universe. We had like the Big Bang, and now everything's just expanding outward at an exponential rate. And it's just like us trying to grasp and understand, what we can. And to me, like my priority is just trying to understand what's going to be like the cornerstone building blocks of different ecosystems. Because like, those are going to be the most important to just invest in and be on at an early stage, because everything that's built on top, perfect. I don't have to worry about that if I'm invested in things that are, at the bottom of the full
Sure.
stack.
Yeah, 100%. Oh man, that was beautiful. That's a great note to end it on. And
Yeah.
Phil, thank you for coming on, man. This has been great. And I need you to stay on the call for another minute. So I'm going to end it
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. Great to chat with you. Thanks for having me.